It was supposed to be just another night. A quiet stop on a long, exhausting drive. Nothing more than a place to rest before continuing on my way. I didn't plan to be here. I wasn't even supposed to take this road. I remember the highway stretching endlessly, the hum of the tires lulling me into that dangerous haze between exhaustion and alertness. I had been driving for hours, the glow of my dashboard clock reminding me that I was far past my limit. My eyes burned. My body ached. And when I saw the flickering neon sign up ahead, vacancy, I didn't hesitate. I should have kept driving. The building stood at the edge of the road, surrounded by nothing but darkness. No other cars in the lot. No gas station nearby. No signs of life except for the weak light pouring from the lobby window. The kind of place you'd pass 100 times and never notice. Yet here it was, standing in the middle of nowhere like it had been waiting for me. The moment I stepped through the glass doors, I knew something felt off. The air inside was thick, like the scent of dust and time had settled into the very bones of the building. It wasn't abandoned. There were lights, a front desk, a faint hum of something electrical in the walls, but it felt like a place that had been left behind. There was no one else in the lobby, no guests lounging on the worn chairs, no receptionist behind the desk, at least not at first. Just silence. And the clock, a large old-fashioned thing hanging on the far wall, its long black hands ticking too loudly in the quiet. Not fast, not slow, but deliberate, each movement slicing through the stillness like a knife. I stood there for a moment, shifting on my feet, listening. It was the kind of silence that wasn't truly empty, the kind where you could almost hear something else beneath it. A whisper, just beyond reach. Then, just as I was about to call out, the receptionist appeared. I didn't hear a door open. I didn't hear footsteps. One moment, the space behind the desk was empty, and the next, he was there, standing too still, his hands pressed flat against the counter. His uniform was clean, crisp, but his face was wrong. Not in a way I could immediately explain. He wasn't deformed or grotesque. He had the right number of eyes, the right shape of nose, the right placement of mouth. But something about them, about him, felt stretched. A performance of humanity rather than the real thing. His smile came too quickly, too perfectly symmetrical, like it had been practiced in a mirror too many times. "Welcome," he said, and his voice was smooth, empty, like it had been sanded down to something inoffensive. "Checking in?" For a second I hesitated. Something in my instincts told me to leave. I should have listened. "Yes," I said instead. "Just for the night." The receptionist nodded once, a slow, precise movement. Then, without breaking eye contact, he turned, opened a drawer, and pulled out a key. Not a key card, a real, metal key. "Room 303, he said, sliding it across the desk. His fingers rested on it just a little too long, like he was reluctant to let go. I reached for it, but before I could lift it, he placed something else beside it, a folded sheet of paper. He tapped it twice, the smile never wavering. "Our rules," he said. I glanced down. The paper was old, edges worn, and slightly yellowed, as if it had passed through many hands before mine. The text was typed, standard, neat, but some of the lines had faint, hurried scribbles over them, like someone had tried to erase, or rewrite, or warn. I unfolded it. There were 5 rules. 1. Do not leave your room after midnight. 2. Do not speak to the other guest. 3. If you hear knocking, do not answer the door. 4. Leave a glass of water by the nightstand before sleeping. 5. The elevator must never be used after 3:15 a.m. I stared at them. The words themselves weren't disturbing on their own. They were strange, sure, but there was nothing outwardly threatening about them. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I ran my thumb over the paper, noticing how certain words had been pressed into the page too hard, like someone had rewritten them with shaking hands. My eyes caught something near the bottom. 2 names, both handwritten. The first was crossed out. Before I could ask, the receptionist cleared his throat. His smile hadn't changed, but there was something sharper behind his eyes now. A thin, almost imperceptible crack in his perfect demeanor. I tapped the paper. What's with the rules? The receptionist tilted his head, considering me. Then slowly, his fingers lifted from the key. They're for your safety, he said, voice smooth, practiced. We wouldn't want a repeat of what happened last time. A pause. My fingers curled around the key, my grip tightening. Last time? The receptionist blinked once, then let out a soft chuckle. It was light, pleasant, too rehearsed. Enjoy your stay, he said. I felt my stomach twist. I turned and made my way toward the hall that led to the rooms, my footsteps muffled against the worn carpet. I told myself not to look back, but as I reached the elevator doors, I couldn't help myself. The receptionist was still watching me. Not with suspicion, not with curiosity, with patience. Like he already knew how my night would end. And then, just before I stepped into the hall, I saw him move. Not a big movement, not even a step. Just his hand, reaching under the desk, sliding something out of view, something I wasn't supposed to see. I kept walking. I didn't ask. But as I reached my room, my grip on the key so tight that the metal edges dug into my skin, I couldn't get his words out of my head. We wouldn't want a repeat of what happened last time. Last time, I didn't know what had happened before, but I had a feeling I was about to find out. And by then, it would already be too late. The door closed behind me with a dull click, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the silence pressing in from all sides. I slid the metal bolt into place, turned the key in the old-fashioned lock, and tested the handle twice. Secure. At least, that's what I told myself. The room was ordinary. That was the most unsettling thing about it. A bed, a nightstand, a dresser with a mirror mounted above it, an old television sitting on a wooden stand in the corner, a small, off-white bathroom door slightly ajar. The walls were beige, the carpet worn, but clean. The air carrying the faintest trace of something floral, like a scent meant to mask something less pleasant. Everything about the room looked normal, but it didn't feel right. I tossed my bag onto the chair in the corner, letting out a slow breath, trying to shake the tension from my shoulders. Maybe I was just exhausted. Maybe I was letting that weird check-in get to me. Then I heard it. Scratching. Faint. Slow. Just beyond the door. My fingers clenched into my palms as I turned my head, pulse kicking up. The sound wasn't loud, but in the thick silence of the room, it might as well have been a scream. A slow, deliberate scrape, like nails dragging across wood. I swallowed hard, stepping toward the door, pressing my ear against the surface. Listening. Silence. I exhaled, shaking my head. Just my imagination. Then, another scratch. Lower this time, near the bottom of the door. I stepped back so fast my heel hit the nightstand. My knee hit the edge of the bed. A surge of ice crawled up my spine. I didn't move for a long moment, standing there in the dim glow of the bedside lamp, staring at the door like I expected something to burst through it. But nothing did. I forced a breath, reached for my phone, and checked the time. 11:58 p.m. Almost midnight. I thought about the first rule. Do not leave your room after midnight. I wasn't planning to, but now I was wondering why. I took another step back, sinking onto the edge of the bed. The mattress creaked beneath my weight. The air felt colder now, pressing against my skin in a way that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. I needed to stop this. Needed to stop letting my mind run away with me. I reached for the remote, flicked on the TV. Static. Loud, jarring, filling the room instantly. My pulse jumped as I scrambled for the volume button, but it didn't work. None of the buttons worked. The screen flickered, white noise buzzing, warping, shifting. Something moved in the static. I froze. I couldn't see it clearly, just a shape. A distortion in the swirling black and white. A dark figure standing in the middle of the screen, unmoving, watching. The remote was useless in my hand. The buttons were unresponsive. The power button did nothing. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the TV cut off. The room fell into silence again. But something had changed. The air felt heavier, the kind of heavy that made it hard to breathe. And then, the note appeared. I didn't see it slide under the door. Didn't hear the paper scrape across the floor. But it was there now, just inches from my foot. A single piece of folded paper. I stared at it. My chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. I leaned down, hand shaking slightly as I picked it up, fingers brushing against the rough surface. I unfolded it. There were only 3 words, scrawled in messy, uneven handwriting. You are not alone. My stomach dropped. A sound cut through the silence. A knock. Software polite. Coming from the door. I shot up, my breath catching in my throat. I remembered the rules. If you hear knocking, do not answer the door. I didn't move. The knock came again. Louder this time. My eyes stayed locked on the door handle. My breath was uneven now, my heart hammering in my chest. Then suddenly, my phone rang. The sound shattered the moment, sending a jolt through me. I scrambled for it, my fingers slick with sweat as I pressed it to my ear. I didn't say anything at first. Just listened. Silence. Then, a voice. Software close. Too close. Why did you come here? My grip tightened on the phone. Who is this? A pause. The air in the room felt suffocating now, like something unseen was pressing down on me, curling around my throat. The voice whispered, "You should have followed the rules." Click. The call disconnected. My phone screen went black. I was frozen in place, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles ached. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. The bathroom mirror. It had fogged over. There was no steam. No reason for it to do that. But there, written in the condensation, clear as day. Run. My pulse roared in my ears. My mouth went dry. I didn't move. Couldn't move. My body refused to obey, locked in place by some invisible force, some primal terror that gripped my very bones. And then, the knocking came again. This time, it didn't stop. I was still staring at the bathroom mirror, my breath shallow, my body stiff with terror. Run. The word was still there, etched into the condensation like a warning from something unseen. But where was I supposed to run? A loud knock shattered my thoughts. Bang, bang, bang. Not soft. Not polite this time. Furious, insistent, desperate. I backed away from the door, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. The knocking didn't stop. It only grew louder, shaking the wood in its frame, rattling the old brass handle. Then, silence. It stopped so abruptly that it made the silence feel even heavier, like the air had been sucked from the room. I took a shaky breath, stepping back further until my legs hit the edge of the bed. And that's when the lights flickered. Once. Twice. And in that brief second of darkness, I saw it. Someone else. Just for a fraction of a second, standing in the corner of the room. A silhouette. A presence. Gone the moment the light returned. I spun toward the corner, my breath hitched in my throat. But there was nothing there. The air was wrong. I could feel it shifting, pressing against me, filling my lungs with a weight that made it hard to breathe. Then came the whisper. Low, weak, desperate. From under the bed. Help me. My stomach twisted violently, my whole body tensed. I turned my head slowly. The space beneath the bed was dark. Too dark. My legs felt locked in place, but I forced myself to move, lowering to my knees, my hands trembling as I reached for my phone. I turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness. At first I saw nothing. Then, fingers, pale, thin, curled around the bed frame. Not mine. The breath left my lungs. A pair of eyes stared back at me from the shadows, wide and hollow. A face, my face, peering up from the darkness. My own voice rasped from beneath the bed, whispering, "You have to help me before it comes back." I scrambled backward, nearly knocking over the nightstand in my panic. The lamp flickered wildly, casting long, jerky shadows along the walls. My breath came in quick gasps as I stared at the space under the bed. Empty. No hands, no eyes, no other me. The only sound was the quiet hum of the old lamp, the distant ticking of the clock on the wall. My body felt numb, my mind screaming at me to leave, get out, escape. But I couldn't move. Then, the closet door creaked open. Slow, deliberate. The old wooden hinges groaned in protest. I turned my head, and there he was, standing in the dim light, just inside the closet. A man, but not just any man. Dressed in the same clothes, the same torn jacket, the same scuffed shoes, even the same cut on his knuckle from where I'd scraped my hand earlier at check-in. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. The figure stepped forward. Not just stepped, moved in perfect sync with me. I backed up. He moved the same way, a fraction of a second behind me, like a delayed reflection in a warped mirror. My chest rose and fell in sharp, ragged breaths. "Who are you?" I forced the words out, my throat dry. The figure smiled. My smile. "I never left." The words sent a shockwave of ice through my veins. My hands clenched at my sides, nails digging into my palms. "That's impossible," I whispered. I stopped. Something was terribly wrong. The figure didn't just look like me. He was me. Every movement, every tiny detail, even the flicker of fear in his eyes. And then, as if to prove it, he did something I wasn't ready for. He spoke again. At the exact same time I did. Word for word. Tone for tone. A perfect echo. I felt my stomach drop as I realized I was no longer sure if I was watching him or if he was watching me. I didn't think. I just ran. The moment that thing, myself, spoke in perfect unison with me. Something inside my brain snapped. I lurched toward the door, fingers fumbling against the brass handle, yanking it open with a force that nearly sent me stumbling into the dimly lit hallway. My heart slammed against my ribs as I tore down the corridor. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The hallway stretched ahead, bathed in the same sickly yellow glow from the old ceiling lights. My shoes slapped against the faded carpet, breath ragged, legs burning. I passed door after door, each identical. Dark wood, golden numbers, keyholes that gleamed like watchful eyes. I had no idea where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. But the hallway, it wasn't ending. The doors kept repeating. 301, 302, 303, 301, 302. I pushed harder, forcing my legs to move faster. The carpet felt thicker now, dragging at my feet like wet sand. My breath hitched, my throat raw from sucking in stale, humid air. 301, 302, 303. I reached out blindly, fingers scraping against the walls as I skidded to a stop. My stomach lurched. I turned, looking back the way I came. The same doors, the same goddamn numbers. I let out a sharp, shaking breath. No, no. I turned forward again, forcing myself to keep going. Maybe if I pushed hard enough, I'd reach the lobby. Find the front desk. Find someone. The air around me shifted. The walls seemed closer than before, the light dimming slightly, taking on an almost reddish tint. The ticking sound of the old hallway clock grew louder, slower, each second stretching painfully long. Then, the elevator. It stood at the end of the hallway, its doors slightly ajar, as if waiting. I lunged forward, slamming my hand against the call button. The old display above the door flickered. 3:15 a.m. I swallowed hard. That can't be right. I jammed my finger against the button again. Harder. Nothing. The doors stayed frozen, just slightly open. A gap of maybe 3 inches, just wide enough to see inside. Darkness. A void that seemed to stretch forever. A faint creak echoed from deep within. Something was in there. I took a step back, then another. The light above the elevator flickered once, twice, and then something moved inside. I didn't see what it was, only the suggestion of movement, the way shadows twisted unnaturally, a shifting mass that pressed against the dark. Then, the doors started opening. I turned and ran, back the way I came, ignoring the scream building in my throat. I sprinted past the same repeating doors, heart hammering, pulse roaring in my ears. The hallway felt endless, stretching longer with every step. I shoved past an old cart, left abandoned near room 305, nearly tripping as I rounded a corner. And there it was. The lobby. My breath caught in my throat. The check-in desk. The old couch in the waiting area. The cracked chandelier swaying slightly from an unseen breeze. I didn't stop to question it. I bolted toward the front doors, slamming both palms against the glass. The doors didn't budge. My breath fogged up the glass as I pushed harder, my shoulders straining. No lock, no chain. But it was like trying to push against a wall. Then, I noticed it, the reflection in the glass. The lobby behind me. Except, it wasn't behind me. It was in front of me, beyond the doors. The same furniture. The same flickering chandelier. The same desk. I turned my head slightly, stomach sinking. The doors didn't lead outside. They led right back into the hotel. I lifted a trembling hand, pressing my fingers to the glass. My reflection stared back at me, wide-eyed, breath shaky. Then, in the reflection, the elevator doors slid fully open, and something stepped out. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I could feel it behind me, the weight of its presence, the way the air around me seemed to press in, thick and suffocating. My fingers trembled against the cold glass. My own breath was the only thing I could hear now, ragged and uneven. It's not real. I squeezed my eyes shut. None of this is real. I tried to focus, tried to breathe, but the silence around me felt wrong. Too quiet, too deliberate. Then, a voice. Right behind my ear. "Are you sure you're the real one?" My stomach turned ice cold. My breath hitched. I spun around. The lobby was empty. I staggered backward, my pulse roaring in my ears. My eyes darted around, my mind scrambling for any sense of logic. There was someone behind me, but the space was unchanged. The front desk stood exactly as it had before. The chandelier above swayed ever so slightly, casting fractured shadows across the floor. I swallowed hard. I have to find the receptionist. Maybe there was a way out. I took a shaky step forward, forcing my legs to move even as every nerve in my body screamed at me to stop. But as I approached the desk, I froze. The receptionist was already there, sitting perfectly still, smiling. But something was off. His teeth were just a little too bright, his lips curled too high, too wide. His hands rested on the counter, long fingers splayed out unnaturally. And then, as if sensing my presence, his fingers moved, not like a twitch, not like a small, involuntary motion. They stretched, elongating in slow, deliberate jerks, the bone shifting beneath thin, papery skin. The tips curled against the desk, clicking softly against the polished wood. My stomach churned. I tried to speak, but my throat felt full, swollen. The receptionist's eyes lifted to meet mine. His smile widened. "You've been busy," he murmured. The air in my lungs froze. "What?" I croaked, barely recognizing my own voice. His gaze flickered downward. I followed his eyes, and my heart stopped. There was a clipboard resting on the counter. A guest log. Names scribbled down in neat, looping handwriting. But only 2 names weren't crossed out. Mine and his. Except the handwriting on his name. It was my handwriting. My mouth went dry. My vision blurred at the edges. A slow, dragging sound echoed through the lobby. I snapped my head up. The room doors. They were opening, one by one. Soft creaks. Identical, synchronized movements. I turned toward the hallway, my breath catching in my throat. The doors stood ajar, each one revealing a perfect, identical version of my room. The same bed, the same nightstand, the same dim lamp flickering in the corner. And on every bed, a shape, not moving, not breathing, just there. I stepped forward, dread curling around my ribs. Something shifted in my peripheral vision. I turned, slowly, and saw myself, sitting at the front desk. The air turned electric. My thoughts fractured. I was standing here. I was standing here. But there I was. My body sitting stiff behind the counter, hands folded, staring straight ahead. I stumbled backward, my knees nearly buckled. This couldn't. The receptionist let out a quiet chuckle. The sound was wrong. I turned to him, my breathing sharp, erratic. And he was closer, standing now, his limbs too long, his face frozen in that unmoving smile. He tilted his head. "Are you sure you're the guest?" A chime rang out through the hotel, an old, shrill bell. From somewhere deep within the building, a door slammed shut. I barely had time to react before I saw something move at the far end of the hallway. The figure from my bed, standing, turning, looking at me, and stepping forward. I wasn't alone anymore. I knew that now. But knowing didn't help. Knowing only made it worse. Because the thing standing across the hall looked like me. Its face was mine, but not exactly. The features were stretched just slightly wrong, as if someone had tried to recreate me from memory, but had forgotten how skin was supposed to fit over bones. Its head cocked to the side. I took a step back. So did it. I lifted my shaking hand. It didn't. I could feel my own breath, but I couldn't see it moving its chest. And then, in a way that wasn't human, wasn't natural, it smiled, and the mirror behind it shattered. A sharp, ear-splitting crack tore through the hallway, the shards splitting apart like jagged teeth. A fractured reflection of me glared back, but the pieces didn't match up. Some pieces showed my back. Some showed my own eyes staring at me when they shouldn't be. The floor tilted beneath my feet. My pulse pounded in my skull. Something was wrong. 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 I had to leave. My feet finally obeyed. I turned and sprinted. The walls blurred around me, the lights above buzzing and flickering as if the building itself was losing power. The hallway stretched, endless and shifting, but I pushed forward, my breath burning in my throat. A door at the end, the exit. I reached for it. My fingers brushed the handle, and a paper slid under the door. A simple, yellowed letter. The words scrawled in my own handwriting. "You had one night. You should have followed the rules." My stomach dropped. The buzzing lights flickered out completely. For a moment, I was trapped in absolute darkness. A heartbeat later, the chandelier above me burst to life. Blinding, golden, flickering candlelight. I wasn't in the hallway anymore. I was back in the lobby, back where I had started. But I wasn't alone. I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. I turned, and there he was, the owner, smiling, grinning, watching me. He was standing behind the desk now, perfectly still, perfectly composed, his hands folded over the check-in ledger. "Going somewhere?" he asked, voice warm, too warm. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He gestured toward the guest book. My name was still there, still the only name not crossed out. No, wait. There was something else. I took a step forward, my fingers tightening into fists. The ink on my name was fresh, wet, as if it had just been written. I staggered back. This isn't right," I whispered. The owner just watched me, unblinking. Then, slowly, almost gently, he turned the book around so I could see it better. The list of guests, the long, looping handwriting. Not just my name. Pages of my name, again, and again, and again. Every single night. My knees nearly buckled. My lungs couldn't pull in enough air. "No," I choked. "No, I don't belong here." The owner tilted his head slightly, and then he grinned. "Then why do you check in every night?" he asked, his voice sounding very strange. Something behind me shifted. I spun around and saw myself standing behind the front desk, hands folded, welcoming the next guest. The door to the hotel creaked open. A traveler stepped inside. They paused at the threshold, hesitating, just like I had. I opened my mouth, to warn them, to scream, to do anything. But no words came out, because I wasn't standing there anymore. I was sitting behind the front desk, smiling, waiting. A pen rested in my hand, poised over the guest log. A new name was waiting to be written. I looked up at the new traveler, and the words left my mouth before I could stop them. Welcome. Will you be staying with us for just one night?